Hello, Player One. Welcome to the Gaming History Club. My name is Gabby.
Hello, and I'm JP. And today we're turning on our flashlights, tuning into the static, and stepping into the misty streets of Silent Hill. It's been 13 years since the last proper Silent Hill game, but the fog is finally lifting. With the release of Silent Hill F, it's the perfect time to revisit the haunted, iconic, and sometimes very confusing world of this cult classic series.
So, pack your health drinks and steel pipes because once we enter Silent Hill, there's no turning back.
So, just to set expectations, we're going to be covering the golden age of Team Silent's mainline games. So, that's Silent Hill 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to see what made the series stand out from its contemporary rivals, such as Resident Evil, how it redefined horror in games, and why it still lingers in our nightmares decades later.
Oh, so we're not going to talk about the remakes, is it?
No talk about the remix, although, there's only one that came out this year.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Fair enough, yeah. But I know that you're a big fan of Silent Hill. Been playing them actually with your mother even since you were a kid, right?
Yes, but this isn't because I was, too scared to play them by myself.
No.
We should
'Cause
clear
you're-
that up. We need
Yeah,
context
sorry.
here, darling. Okay, I was only 10 years old. Okay, bless me.
That's true. It's more because your mom was also a big fan to play Silent Hill, right?
Huge fan, actually. She absolutely loved it. So she definitely liked all the puzzle elements in the game and like the creepy factor and all the things to read and having to press the X button literally every 2 seconds to make sure you're investigating absolutely everything, right? She
Yep.
loved that part. But turns out she wasn't so good at shooting all of the monsters in the game. So guess what? The pad would be handed over to the poor 10-year-old JP. And I was expected to perform my video game magic, obviously.
Okay. No, that's fair. That's fair. And you also played all of them, right?
Yeah, I absolutely did, yes. I think there's one that I didn't play, so I think that was for the PSP. I think that's Silent Hill Origins.
Ah, right.
Yeah, but all the mainline games I did play, and also very close to the actual time they were coming out. Like, I didn't play them literally the same day or month they came out, but, like kind of close, but definitely within a few months of them releasing.
Yeah, I think what I really love about Silent Hill is always about those music, like haunting music, whenever you play. It's just always so cool. But for me personally, as a kid, I relate more to Heather, I guess, because, women protagonist and all that.
And she actually had a personality.
Yeah, I would say so too. I really like Silent Hill 3, but, I don't want to talk too much about it because we'll dig in even more later about like
Yes.
the games and stuff.
But I'm really glad you did mention the audio and the music because even us, we get, very complacent about talking about all of the really great music in video games. And it's a massive part to the nostalgia and
Oh,
how
yeah.
much you actually appreciate a game, even if it's not always super consciously. The music really makes the game sometimes. And Silent Hill is like definitely a case for that.
Right, so let's get into it then. Let's kick things off with the big question. What made Silent Hill stand out from all the other survival horror games at the time? Because clearly there were other stuff too when Silent Hill got released.
Yeah, so if you rewind back to 1996, Resident Evil had already made a big splash in the video game scene. It definitely popularized the survival horror genre and pretty much defined what it is as well. So we have the zombies, we have a giant creepy mansion, we have very cheesy voice acting. Like, it was so cheesy you could melt it on toast, actually. Or should I say a Jill sandwich?
Oh god, yeah, that scene was like beyond cringe. I don't know what to say.
It was basically a B-movie horror you could actually play. I think that's a good way of, thinking about Resident Evil, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even George Romero, the guy who made some of the best zombie films ever, credited Resident Evil with bringing zombies back into pop culture. And naturally, of course, right? Konami said, hey, let's do our own version of that because they also want to get to the trend, right?
Yeah, so that would make you think, oh, they got their, big names onto the project. But you know what? No, actually, quite on the contrary somehow. the team they picked was, far from Konami's A team, As a matter of fact, Team Silent was a group of misfits. They were developers with failed projects or who just didn't have a lot of experience making video games, to be honest. Especially not, in the corporate setting. They were pretty much, the leftover rejects in many ways. But you know what? This is exactly why Silent Hill turned out the way it did.
Yeah, I think it's cool that they weren't under as much pressure to make that blockbuster copy of Resident Evil. So instead, they did have a bit more liberty to, out zombie the zombie game. And they had the space to ask, what can we do differently? And the answer was, let's go psychological instead.
Yeah, so if we think of Resident Evil, it's almost like they do the horror about what is right in front of you, the horror you can see, the zombies, and the dogs and the smashing windows and stuff. But then Silent Hill, on the other side, it was more about what you cannot see.
Yeah, also like with Resident Evil, you have playable action heroes, right? With like cops and soldier, which is quite different. But yes, you said though, the horror in Silent Hill was more ambiguous. It's less science experiment go wrong kind of vibe. It's more let's unravel your deepest fear. It's definitely different.
Right. There were definitely no cops and soldiers. They're actually just very ordinary people. We have a dad looking for his missing daughter, and we have a husband who receives a letter from his terminally ill wife. So yeah, instead of guns and inventory puzzles being the whole show, you're dealing with fog, you're dealing with radio static, and monsters that look like they crawled straight out of your therapy session.
One thing I always notice though, it seems odd that both of these Japanese survival horror games are set in America, both Resident Evil and Silent Hill. It's somehow very Western, and I wasn't really wondering this when I was younger, but I definitely asked that question later on. Like, what's with the American setting? Like, why? It's a Japanese game.
So the best answer I could come up with researching is that in the 90s, the Japanese media, they seem to have quite a fascination with the idea of the small American town. So things like Twin Peaks, for example, that was a huge thing in Japan. So I think that it kind of explains why the Japanese developers, both Capcom and Konami with Resi and Silent Hill, really enjoyed to put the setting there because for them, it was exotic, it was eerie and dreamlike. Maybe, how we feel about Japanese settings in our video games, actually. So Silent Hill became this American town, as imagined by people who just, never lived in one. And that's why it feels both familiar and strangely off at the same time.
Although I gotta be honest, as an Asian person myself, I got creeped out a lot more with like the Japanese setting than like the American setting. So, I don't know actually about that.
Well, we all know the Japanese make a very special type of horror, don't they? With, The Ring and, the...
Was that The Grudge?
Yeah, exactly, that guy.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying, right? They make a very special type of horror, okay?
But anyway, Resident Evil, or Biohazard in Japan, did the same thing with the big mansions, shady corporations, and Midwestern labs, so to say. So, for the Japanese players, it was certainly exotic. For Western players, it felt like looking at their own culture through a semi-blurry, broken-ish mirror, because that's not a true reflection either.
Yeah, and in Silent Hill, that not quite American, not quite Japanese vibe made the whole place feel like a nightmare caught in between two different worlds.
And of course, there's the fog, right? Which wasn't just an artistic choice. It was actually a technical workaround. The PlayStation couldn't handle long draw distances without things looking rough. So Team Silent decided to just double down and they made the fog part of the atmosphere. They cleverly hide the hardware's limit while turning the world into this more suffocating and claustrophobic space.
Yes, and the same went for grainy textures, the shadows, and the unforgettable sound design, of course. What should have been a weakness became the game's iconic style. So when you put it all together, Silent Hill wasn't just Konami's answer to Resident Evil. it was a completely different flavor of horror.
Yeah, if Resident Evil scared you with the loud bangs and the gore, Silent Hill scared you with silence and dread and the creeping thought that maybe the real monster is you kind of deal. And yeah, it's definitely more psychological, right? As the characters were wrestling with their own trauma, guilt, and sanity itself. But anyway, let's step into the game. Let's step into Silent Hill itself, the town. One of the biggest reasons the game hit so hard was the environment. And this is where Silent Hill instantly set itself apart from Resident Evil. I mean, we gotta admit, Capcom's game looked great, but it used flat, pre rendered backgrounds with 3D characters slapped on top of it. Silent Hill, on the other hand, went full 3D. The town, the building, the characters, even all of the stuff you find inside. Everything, really. They used 3D models for that.
Yeah, and on the PlayStation, that was an absolute nightmare to pull off properly. But that's why they were so genius in how they were dealing with the limitation. They added the fog, and by masking the town in the fog, it's not only adding the spooky atmosphere, but they're actually also keeping the frame rate stable and making it, nicely playable rather than like a stuttery mess. You could only ever see a few steps ahead, so your imagination really filled in the rest what was actually inside of that fog waiting for you. The limitation actually became part of the horror itself.
And of course, my favorite, they played around with the mechanics as well. The radio. That's iconic, right? Giving us this awful static, blaring when the monsters are nearby. I mean, it's annoying, but also you can't really hate it because it's kind of telling you, heads up, you're not alone. So, yeah, I mean, it's scary, but it helps you. You can't really complain.
Yeah, and the flashlight does something really similar as well. I never really caught onto this when I was younger, but if you want to see anything, obviously you have to turn the flashlight on, and that helps you with not feeling too scared by, roaming Silent Hill in pure darkness. But as soon as you switch it on, the enemies can actually see you easier too, and you're actually easier to spot then. Silent Hill was brilliant at making every tool you had feel like both a blessing, but also a curse.
By the way, I didn't know this, but the town itself wasn't a generic American setting, so to say. The devs actually drew from real US towns, but it was also this strange dreamlike version of America. The street names they were using were actually Easter eggs as well, references to horror authors like Richard Matheson and Robert Bloch.
Yeah, and here's where the development story of Silent Hill also gets really fascinating. So, it started development back in 1996 inside Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo. Officially, it was supposed to be Konami's big shot at breaking into the US market, and that's why the atmosphere feels almost like a Hollywood horror. But behind the scenes, things were actually quite messy at Konami. The higher-ups, they weren't quite impressed with the game, and the team felt like a complete bunch of outsiders, like rejects. So instead of chasing the profits, the team actually started chasing something much more personal with the game they were making. They wanted to make players actually feel something.
Keiichiro Toyama, the director, wasn't even a horror buff. He was more into UFOs and the occult and David Lynch films. Yeah, I think we can definitely see that surreal or otherworldly influence seeps into the game.
Yeah, no doubt. When I heard about this, it almost felt like everything made sense now. Okay,
Yeah,
this is why Silent Hill is the way it is,
that's
actually.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also you got people like Hiroyuki Owaku, who wrote the text and the riddles in the game, and he was deliberately vague when he made this text, so players would actually argue about the meaning of things in the game, which, yeah, we were all doing, totally, of course we were.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, we can't forget the legend, Takayoshi Sato, right? Well, this guy was basically Silent Hill's unsung hero, for real. He was, at first, he was stuck doing all the grunt work at Konami, like choosing fonts. Very important.
The most important aspect of developing a video game.
Definitely. He was also in charge for file sorting.
Yeah, less important.
Yeah, font was more important, true. But he was also teaching people 3D basics until he basically blackmailed his bosses.
Yeah, so his bosses were completely trying to sideline him. They wouldn't give him the credit that he was actually due. So he made a demo movie on his own and he showed it to the higher ups. And he said to them, either let me design the characters and the cinematics, or I'm not going to share how I did it with everyone else. And this completely worked. So he designed all of the characters, he rendered the cinematics himself, and he did this while he lived inside of the office for 2 years. And he was using 150 computers at night to finish all of these cutscenes, all while his supervisors, like I said, were trying to sideline him. So this guy was team silent in so many ways.
I feel like that story is so cool because you can truly see it here how Silent Hill wasn't supposed to be a masterpiece, according to Konami, but because these so called rejects had the freedom to just follow their instincts, they actually had the upper hand due to the low expectations and over delivered in the end.
But back to the town itself. On the surface, the places you visit and the environment, they're very boringly normal. You've got a school, you got a hospital, you got the streets of a sleepy town called Silent Hill. But it's exactly that normality that makes it so unsettling. Like, you've been in a school corridor before, we all have, but never one where the lockers are bleeding and you can hear scratching in the background.
No, yeah. And yeah, that familiarity is turned grotesque. So instead of some gothic castle like in Resident Evil, like big mansion or anything, it's more like welcome to Midwich Elementary. But then ta-da! The environment change, the walls bleeding and all that. Oh God.
It's not so much ta-da as much as like, but
Yeah.
okay.
More like oops.
So at first you're wandering through fog and snow, and of course that feels isolating, right? But then all of a sudden the siren blasts, and yeah, we are in the other world, as we like to call it. The floors turn to rusted metal grates, walls drip with blood. It's like the whole town suddenly dropped into hell. And the fog now doesn't feel so bad anymore, does it?
No, definitely not. I prefer the fog. Thank you.
Over
Yeah.
darkness and bleeding walls, yeah, sign me up for the fog any day.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm mostly afraid of the rusty gates because, like, ew.
Yeah, I am not fogging around. Leave me in the nice part of Silent Hill.
So the team's art director, Takayoshi Sato, pulled from his own fears and also from Western horror films. They wanted the town to feel like it was alive,
It's alive.
like it was conspiring against you.
And of course, tied to that nightmare is the story itself. On the surface, you're just a dad, Harry Mason looking for his missing daughter Cheryl. But the deeper you go, you find cults, ritual sacrifices, gods,
UFOs.
UFOs.
Because that's important. But if that wasn't enough, it leans into psychological horror as well. You're never quite sure if Silent Hill is haunted, like the town is haunted, or if it's all in Harry's head, or is the town itself actually a torture chamber?
But one of the coolest things about Silent Hill, of course, is the multiple endings. Nowadays, that might not sound like a big deal, but let me tell you, back then, multiple endings in a survival horror, especially not just a, good or bad ending. No, like, good plus, bad minus. That was a game changer. This was not very common at the time whatsoever. Of course, adventure games like Maniac Mansion had done this before, and of course some RPGs did as well. But yeah, for the horror game genre, yeah, this was new.
Yeah, it was definitely quite different, and it's pretty cool that not all of the possible endings are dramatic, not as simple as good or bad, as you said. Silent Hill actually said, yeah, we'll traumatize you with demon gods and child sacrifice, but also, what if a UFO actually did it? You literally get abducted by aliens in one of the endings.
Yeah, or you find out that a dog was actually behind everything.
Yeah, not the first one, but yeah, you're right. It's like, what are you talking about? But it's great, right?
Yeah, it definitely became, part of that Silent Hill tradition, almost like the devs winking at you after making you suffer through this really difficult and scary game.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that contrast of humor and creepiness is actually Silent Hill in a nutshell. It's just unpredictable.
Well, talking about Silent Hill in a nutshell, what's actually going on in Silent Hill? Let's do a bit of a rundown because the game does not make it very clear on your first playthrough what is actually happening. And as a matter of fact, most of this is actually pieced together by hardcore cultish fans of the game in the forums and stuff.
You think you're just Harry Mason, the unlucky dad who crashed his car and lost his daughter Cheryl, but actually it was way messier.
Right. So Cheryl is actually the split off half of Alessa, a girl who was burned alive during a cult ritual. The cult of Silent Hill wanted to use Alessa to birth their demon god, but her soul literally broke into two pieces. One half is suffering inside of Silent Hill, and the other half is living on as Cheryl, Harry's daughter, in the outside world.
I don't know if I should be happy they used the name Alessa because that's basically my middle name. But yeah, I would assure you, JP, I'm not some demon child.
I've told you this before. Alessa is, pretty damn badass. So put yourself in her shoes. This creepy cult, these 20 people, they sacrifice you. So, you give birth to this demon god. But you're like, you know what, guys? No, I'm going to split my soul in half. I'm going to suffer here forever. And, that's not an easy thing to do. I've never been in that situation personally.
Well, I hope not. But yeah, going back to the game, the town itself is basically becoming that projection of Alessa's trauma. That's why you've got the hospitals and schools and the whole other world dripping with pain and fire. You are literally walking around inside her nightmare.
Yes. So the reason Harry's wandering through all of this hellscape is because Cheryl and Alessa are trying to reunite because if they do, it'll either bring peace or it'll summon a god that ends the world. Yeah, we're not quite sure, but it's definitely one of the two.
Yep.
So that is why those multiple endings actually matter a lot. Sometimes you save Cheryl, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you stop the cult's god, sometimes you don't, and sometimes again aliens, because why not?
That's basically the story of the first Silent Hill game.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah,
Nice.
I know. But before we move on to Silent Hill 2, can we just pause and talk about the movie for a second? Because I feel like a lot of people think the games and the movie share the same DNA, but are they truly?
Yeah, thank you for saying people because this was mostly me. Yeah, I thought there was something here when there wasn't. So here's a quick fact drop. The first Silent Hill movie was directed by Christoph Gans and it came out in 2006. And honestly, fans of the game, we were a little bit split. Some loved the atmosphere, but the casual horror movie crowd, they thought it was a stylish movie, but a little bit confusing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to complain about people's acting, but let's say the acting were not particularly AAA.
It seems funny because before we mentioned Resident Evil is kind of like a B movie, and it turns out Silent Hill made a B movie.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's quite okay though, I would say. But anyway.
Explain this myth to us, which I also thought was a thing, but
Right. Yeah. So one of the biggest myths out there is that the original game was inspired by this real town called Centralia in Pennsylvania. But actually, that wasn't true at all. Team Silent weren't looking at Centralia when they made the game, but the movie was inspired by Centralia. And honestly, that place is as Silent Hill as it gets in real life.
Yeah, Centralia is basically Silent Hill. I can see why they drew inspiration from this place for the movie. So get this. In 1962, Centralia had an underground coal mine fire break out, and nobody managed to put it out, and it just kept burning, like for a really long time, like it's still burning now. Yes, over 60 years later, this coal mine is burning. And as a matter of fact, it's predicted that it's going to be burning for 250 years or more still. So in Centralia, whole chunks of the town had to be abandoned, but the streets have cracked open and there's smoke, like carbon monoxide, coming out of the streets, seeping up from the ground. It's super Silent Hill.
Yeah, I mean, you can totally tell why people were mistakenly thinking that's basically Silent Hill because of the cracked roads and the fog, which is basically smoke in real life. But yeah, imagine waking up in your little Pennsylvania town and realizing the ground under your feet is literally on fire. So yeah, that's basically Silent Hill, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. By the 80s, most of the town was condemned and the residents were relocated. But today, still a handful of residents remain, which is really creepy. I wonder if they're just waiting there for tourists to come around and scare you.
Oh my god, it's an attraction.
Well, funny that you should mention that because, Gabby, if you really like to, you can still visit the area and see those split open roads with smoke coming out of them like in the real Silent Hill.
Ugh.
But if you do, let me tell you, you better bring your radio and your flashlight.
But anyway, I'm ready for Silent Hill 2 now.
Let's do it. So, the first game set the stage, but Silent Hill 2 is taking everything up a notch. It was released in September 2001 on the PlayStation 2, and it marked a serious leap to a new generation of consoles, and we all know what comes along with that. Better graphics, smoother 3D, but even more terrifying fog.
Yes, Team Silent was back, of course, but some roles have shifted actually. Keiichiro Toyama, who directed the first game, already moved on, so the reins were handed to other team members of the team. Masahiro Ito returned as creator designer. Takayoshi Sato continued crafting the cinematics and character models, and I presume he didn't need to blackmail anyone this time. And Akira Yamaoka composed another unforgettable soundtrack. So they were carrying the torch, but with fresh ideas this time.
Yeah, fresh ideas, and boy, did they reinvent the horror for Silent Hill 2. So the environments retained that foggy, isolating feel, but yeah, with better textures, lighting, and details. Hospitals, apartments, abandoned towns, all of it felt more real and more suffocating. Graphic advancement is cool, but the real shift was in the story. This wasn't just about tracking a missing person this time around. This time, the protagonist, James Sunderland, had a past he could not escape. His wife had been terminally ill, and the psychological weight of his own guilt drove the entire narrative. I can't go into it too much because, hey, maybe for someone this is a spoiler because the remake of Silent Hill 2 came out not too long ago. But there was a lot in here with the protagonist this time around.
Yes, and I think the character designs are worth mentioning as well. So James' wife is called Mary, and there is another character called Maria. And Maria was basically based aesthetically on Christina Aguilera. I can't really see the resemblance, but I think you show me the side by side picture.
It's mostly in the outfit. It's not so much in the face, but modeled roughly after her. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's meant to be more than eye candy, but also the emotional core of James' journey, even though Maria is not Mary, which is really strange. So yeah, the game doesn't just scare you with monsters or confuse you with like Mary and Maria, by the way. Every enemy, every twisted corridor is tied to his guilt, shame, and suppressed desires.
And speaking of characters, we can't forget one of the main enemies in the game, of course, Pyramid Head.
Woo! Yes.
Yeah, of course, probably the most iconic monster in the entire franchise. Masahiro Ito designed him specifically as a manifestation of James's need for punishment. He was silent, faceless, and brutal.
Yes, and of course, Silent Hill 2 also had multiple endings, just like the first one, but this time they were even more personal, let's say, because what you saw at the end will actually reflect on how you interpreted James' actions and choices throughout the game. So the ending that you get actually kind of changed the story, if that makes sense. And of course, the infamous UFO ending shows up again, which makes it lighter after all the darkness.
Yeah, but my personal favorite has to be the dog ending, of course.
Yeah,
Apparently, a dog has been the mastermind all along.
it all makes sense.
It does. So far, Silent Hill 2 is the only game in the franchise to get a full remake by the Bloober team, bringing it to modern consoles with updated graphics, smoother controls, and new touches to the story. It's what many fans consider the pinnacle of the series. Although, me personally, I still hold a soft spot for the first game, which is also getting a remake though. Whoop whoop.
Yeah, I know, nostalgia is powerful, isn't it? But let's move on. Let's talk about the people and the weird stuff you have to do to survive in Silent Hill 2. Because it's not just monsters and guilt trips in here.
No, the puzzles in Silent Hill 2 are just as memorable as Pyramid Head himself. Like the coin puzzle in the Blue Creek apartments. You're hunting for these three coins, an old man, snake, and prisoner coins. And you then have to place them correctly into a desk based on a poem riddle that you see on the desk. And it's one of those moments where the game really makes you slow down and think away from all of this, hunting through the fog and trying to escape Pyramid Head. But of course, you're slowing down, and at the same time, you're kind of scared because he might just pop around the corner and start slashing at you.
Yeah, and also the disgusting shower drain mini puzzle. The one where you need a bent needle and a piece of hair to
Ugh.
fish a key out of the drain. You know what? I am not touching a bent needle.
You're
in
not
this
touching a
play.
bent needle? I'm not touching a piece of hair.
But yeah, it's so yucky, but it's very Silent Hill, I guess. But yeah,
Yeah.
puzzles are brilliant.
What makes it so Silent Hill, I think, is how the puzzles always kind of integrated into the environment rather than, feeling very tacked on. Like,
Yeah.
here's a key, red key for the red door. It's not so much inventory; it's about the environment around you, and that's really
Yes.
cool. The puzzles are creepy, yes, but they also reinforce the story as well. Every riddle you solve, once you actually understand what is going on inside of James's head, perhaps after like a playthrough in the past, you realize how everything reflects what's going on in his mind.
And speaking of James' mind, other than the enemies, the characters you meet are just as psychologically loaded. Angela, Eddie, and Laura, each of them represent a different type of trauma or guilt.
Yeah, and that's again where the multiple endings tie into everything. So, depending on how you play the game, you get different conclusions, and the endings are called Leave, In Water, Maria, Rebirth, and of course the UFO joke ending and the dog ending. It makes replaying the game feel kind of essential, actually, because each ending, and I think this is what you were trying to explain before, Gabby, it's a slightly different story which influenced how you perceive James in the first place. So you might get one ending and it turns James into like a bit of a monster with some backstory, right? So
Yep.
it changes the start of the story rather than just the end alone. It's very meta in a way, actually. But talking about endings, I guess that's the perfect segue now into Silent Hill 3. So, while Silent Hill 2 was all about the psychological, Silent Hill 3 loops us back to the first game narratively. This time you play as Heather, Harry Mason's daughter, not Cheryl, and you're pulling the threads from the original story into a whole new perspective. And yes, the puzzles, monsters, and psychological tension continue to evolve from there.
Yes, so after Silent Hill 2, Team Silent had a bit of a crisis. They weren't sure how to follow it up, so they were thinking, do they make another psychological standalone story, or do they go back and give closure to the original Silent Hill?
Yeah, weirdly enough, they played around with this idea of making Silent Hill 3 more of like a straight up shooter game as well. Can you imagine Heather running around with heavy firepower blasting monsters?
Ugh.
Yeah, good job they did that idea. Would have basically just been Doom.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, thankfully the fans actually had a big influence here. A lot of people wanted closure after the first game's events, so Team Silent made the controversial decision to go with a direct sequel from the first game instead. Silent Hill 3 was going to bring back the cult storyline and tie up those threads instead.
Yeah, and speaking of the team, most of the big names were still here in Team Silent, but some of them had shifted roles. So Keiichiro Toyama, the director of the first game, had left Konami by now, but key figures like Masashi Tsuboyama, who had worked on the background design in Silent Hill 2, stepped up as director for Silent Hill 3. And Akira Yamaoka stayed on board, of course, for both sound design and music, which, let's be honest, is half the reason the game still haunts us today.
Right, so let's get into the game itself. This time, as you said before, we're playing as Heather, although we said she isn't Cheryl, but she is actually Cheryl Mason, Harry's adopted daughter from the first game. Although, you know what, you're not supposed to know this in the beginning, but I think this is like old enough that I can actually spoil this.
Yeah, a couple of decades. Yeah, you're probably okay.
Yeah, not too bad, is it? But yeah, the cult from the first Silent Hill hasn't given up, and they still want her for their grand plan of resurrecting their god. So it is a direct continuation of the nightmare Harry thought he already escaped.
Yeah, and it's gut-wrenching to me that you mention Harry because, of course, one of the biggest moments in Silent Hill 3, of course, is where Heather finds Harry, the original protagonist from the first game, dead in front of the TV. For fans like me who have been following the series, that scene hit like a ton of bricks. It felt personal. You think Joel dying in The Last of Us 2 was a big deal? You haven't seen Harry Mason hunched over on his couch in front of a static TV.
No, definitely really sad. Silent Hill 3, though, also come with more awesome puzzles, as you expect. Like the Shakespeare puzzle in the bookstore.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with this one, but yeah, you're basically rearranging volumes of the book to form a code. Or that creepy haunted house ride puzzle in the amusement park, which makes you feel like you're in some cursed carnival. Some of them were granted pretty cryptic, like that Shakespeare one. I'm like, what are you on about?
Yeah, Silent Hill is cryptic puzzles galore.
Yep, 100%.
Of course, with a new game, the graphics were improved, as they usually are with a new sequel. But the most important thing for me was that the protagonist is now less of just a psychological drone. Heather definitely had more personality. She was sarcastic. You could see she was scared, like in her eyes, like in her expression, the way she talks and is. And she was also defiant sometimes. And that gave the whole game a little bit more bite.
On the other hand, the developers themselves were a little bit more mixed though. Some felt like they were boxed in, forced to make a sequel when they could have told another original story, because some of them actually did want an original story instead. But at the same time, Silent Hill 3 still stands out as one of the darkest, most intense entries in the series.
And that's really saying something for Silent Hill. Of course, they kept the tradition with the multiple endings. You've got the normal ending where Heather defeats the cold Scott. You got the possessed ending where she might be corrupted by the darkness. And of course, the UFO joke ending returns, complete with aliens abducting both Heather and Harry.
But it's now the time to talk about Silent Hill 4, The Room. I don't know how many of you might actually have played this game, because me personally, I haven't. I mean, I've researched about the game, but I've never actually played it back then.
Don't worry, I'll play it for you, Gabby.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, but Silent Hill 4, there's always been this rumor floating around that it started as a totally different game that later got rebranded into Silent Hill's sequel. But digging into it, apparently that's not true.
Yeah, so the reality here is a little less dramatic, but just as interesting. So, after 3 games, Team Silent realized that they couldn't just keep making the same foggy streets and haunted schools and blood-dripping hospitals. They needed to change up the formula a little bit so as to not get too repetitive.
Exactly. So the team tried to cook up this new idea centered on being trapped in an apartment room. At first, they weren't even sure if it should be a spin off or a proper numbered sequel, because if you think about it, you would want to see Silent Hill in a Silent Hill game, like The
Yes,
Town.
it was different, but was it too different? They weren't quite sure. Was it going to be a spin off or was it going to be a mainline game?
Yeah, but I guess the more they worked on it, the more they started to feel like it's actually Silent Hill as well, just twisted into a different shape, basically. And yeah, that's how The Room was born, actually.
Yeah, but this game split fans like no other. Some people loved it for trying something bold, but others hated it for straying way too far away from the original Freeze formula. And honestly, I was a little bit in that camp as well. I also remember thinking a little bit to myself, like, oh, what is this? I'm trapped in a flat and crawling through a hole, and now I'm in a subway. But I think looking back, I appreciate it more now that the Team Silent was trying to be, not too repetitive. They were trying to be creative, which is what made the first game so incredibly cool too.
Yeah, but I think the split comes down to that point, right? To how different it was. I mean, for one, your home base isn't a safe hub anymore. In the older games, you'd find this safety in a safe point or a quiet room. But in Silent Hill 4, your own apartment, room 302, literally turns against you instead. Holes started to appear and objects started to move without you moving it, of course. And yeah, the space that's supposed to be your safe zone started to rot, just like other Silent Hill games.
Okay, but let's go back to the objects moving. So you weren't moving the object.
Yeah.
They were
That's what I'm
moving by
saying. Yeah.
itself. Ah, okay. Because if I asked, Henry to move the glass, I wouldn't be spooked out that the glass is moving.
Exactly. So
Okay.
I meant objects move on its own.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, instead of exploring Silent Hill on foot the way we're used to from the first three games, you actually are in your apartment and you're crawling through a hole in your bathroom to access the so-called other worlds. So it feels a lot more segmented and fractured out Silent Hill rather than, it's just a town and you can just wander around it like in the previous games. And I think this design shift really threw some fans off.
Yes, and the gameplay was actually different too. The gameplay focuses on first person exploration inside the room and the much heavier use of melee combat outside of the room. And there's also this escort section with Eileen. Everyone love an escort section,
Oh,
right?
yeah, Resident Evil 4, Silent Hill 4. You know what? When you make a game for the fourth time, you just gotta escort a princess, don't you?
Yeah, I know, right?
What made Silent Hill 4 special is what makes all of the Silent Hill games special, but especially true for Silent Hill 4, it was the atmosphere. The idea of being trapped in a single location, forced to keep returning to a space that was growing more hostile. It gave it this oppressive, kind of like paranoid energy to it. And story wise, it went in a different direction as well. So it was less about, cults and gods and demons. And it was actually more about just a serial killer named Walter Sullivan and his gruesome ritual murders. Walter's whole backstory is one of the darkest inside of the series. And while the game isn't a direct sequel like Silent Hill 3 was to Silent Hill 1, there's still a lot of connections that piece everything together. Silent Hill, the town itself, is still the influence behind Walter's madness, and there's references to the cult and the order from the Silent Hill 1 game. So it all exists in the same universe, but we are now looking at it through a different lens of Silent Hill.
And yeah, that's probably why fans were split, right? If you wanted more of Silent Hill's town, fog, and cult mysticism, you didn't really get it here. Like, not much, really. But if you were open to a fresh experiment, the room delivered something deeply unsettling in its own right.
Exactly. And in hindsight, I think it's one of the most creative swings Team Silent ever took. Silent Hill 4 was imperfect, but it was unforgettable. And sadly, speaking of unforgettable, Silent Hill 4 ended up being the last game made by Team Silent before Konami handed over the series to Western Studios. Which means, in a way, The Room marks the end of an era, the original era of Silent Hill, and where we will stop now also following the Silent Hill story.
That's true. Yep. And yeah, we have to be honest for a second here. And yes, we'll keep it fair, but we're not going to pretend that there wasn't some corporate nastiness here.
Yeah, very nasty stuff.
Yeah, after Silent Hill 4, the original Team Silent gradually stopped making games together. Konami folded the Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo operation back into the parent company, and Team Silent was effectively disbanded. Their members scattered to other companies or left game development over the following years, sadly. That's why the later Silent Hill games were made by outside studios rather than the original Japanese teams.
Yeah, the later Silent Hill games felt so much more different than the original Japanese development team, Team Silent, made it feel. Yeah, and there's actually a lot of angry folklore out there as well to how it all went down. So, especially in the forums, you'll hear people say, you know, they were making Silent Hill 5. Team Silent was making Silent Hill 5, and then out of nowhere, Konami just kills the team, and it's, done. But the truth is a little bit different. Broadly speaking, Konami reorganized, okay, and the in-house lineup has changed. So some of the team members, they left voluntarily, and others moved on to different projects. So it wasn't quite as, clear as, Konami just, cut the team and they were done. Like, it wasn't quite like that. Anyway, we can't talk about Silent Hill without also mentioning PT and the cancelled Silent Hills, right?
Hills, many hills.
The Hills of Eyes. No, the Hills of Silence. Yes. So you might remember the wave of excitement back in 2014 when Konami very quietly released PT, a playable teaser, in August. And this completely detonated the internet and the gaming community as a whole. This thing was downloaded more than 1 million times, okay? And critics called it one of the most genuinely frightening experiences in years. This wasn't just a teaser trailer or a demo for a game. This felt like a very short but perfect terror machine.
Yeah, what made PT special was how minimal but relentless it was. A looping corridor, small repeating changes that you have to pay attention to, very detailed, tiny environmental puzzles, and a creeping sense of always being watched. If you ever play Visage, this probably inspired it in the first place.
Yeah, so, oh, goodness me, I feel bad if you've never seen PT or some gameplay around it, but
Yeah, it's creepy.
yeah, it's really spooky. It stripped the franchise down to pure atmosphere and dread, and it teased a game that was being directed by Hideo Kojima himself, with Guillermo del Toro involved as well, the movie director, and starring Norman Reedus. So the hype was real, Gabby, and it felt like Silent Hill was going to be reinvented into this glorious thing once again. But no, it didn't. It all fell apart. Yeah. So by spring 2015, the relationship between Kojima and Konami had soured very publicly.
Yeah, if you remember all that debacle, because they certainly didn't keep things silent.
No, there was some F words being, and I don't mean Silent Hill F, I mean real F words were being flown around.
Yeah, Konami restructured, quietly removed Kojima's branding from Metal Gear promos, and sources reported there were deep internal conflicts. So within days of those fallout rumors, reports surfaced that Silent Hills was no longer happening, and Konami removed PT from the PlayStation Store on April 29, 2015. That was disappointing.
Yes, and this is again a topic for another time, but you can't just erase video games. Like, why is this gone? You can't even get someone to play this again now, yeah?
It's really sad.
Anyway, the cancellation was confirmed through various reports and statements from people involved, and the demo was made unavailable, and this completely enraged us Silent Hill fans.
Up to today, people still talk about why. Was it because Kojima was about to leave? Were there creative disputes or money problem? In reality, it was more a bundle of things. So there was this, of course, Kojima Konami breakdown, an internal company restructure that deprioritized certain AAA projects, and also Konami's broader strategic shift at the time.
Yeah, it was just a storm of reasons, basically. The company was moving to a different business mix, more mobile games, more gambling and pachinko, and other low risk revenue streams compared to making big hitters for the consoles, right? And that change made the big console projects like Silent Hills just politically vulnerable inside of Konami. Those corporate decisions combined with the fallout with Kojima as well, it just completely killed what could have been a huge reboot for Silent Hill back in 2015. Fans reacted strongly, but there was a huge petition and a lot of public fury too. So Guillermo del Toro even said F Konami in public, which gives you a sense of how bitter it actually got between all of the parties involved. And the fact that PT was pulled entirely, it wasn't sold, it wasn't archived, it just made it all feel like Konami had erased a piece of gaming history.
So the demo's disappearance added salt to the wound and turned an already painful cancellation into a kind of cultural loss for horror fans. It's messy and frankly upsetting if you care about authorship in games. On one hand, you kind of can see Konami's business case pivoting to more predictable revenue streams when the industry is risky. Such a business move there, basically. But on the other hand, they killed something the community loved, and that had genuine creative momentum. And that tension between business decision and creative tragedy is something we can't ignore. It's part of the series' history now.
Yeah, bottom line is this. PT still influences horror games today still. Its cancellation is a scar fans still talk about now, and the breakup between Kojima and Konami really helped push Kojima into making the weird next chapter in his own career, which of course was Death Stranding, where Kojima, Guillermo del Toro, and Norman Reedus, instead of making Silent Hills, well, at least they made Death Stranding for us. But still, as Silent Hill fans, we were left in the dust and we were very bitter. And the anger is understandable, right?
Of course, but not all is bad, right? While the whole Kojima Konami slash PT saga ended up leaving fans aching, there's a sense now that the table is about to flip in a good way. Hopefully, anyway. Because Silent Hill F isn't just another entry, it's doing something bold and reversed and different.
At the risk of sounding like an advert for the game, but let's take it.
Yeah, we're not getting paid for this.
No, exactly. But you can see why we're so excited after having, dived deep into the history of Silent Hill. This is really exciting stuff. All through the early series, we saw Japanese creators making horror games set in America, that small town USA, the fog, the Western horror tropes that filled through a Japanese lens. It's what gave Silent Hill its uncanny feeling. But now Silent Hill F is set in 1960s Japan, in a place called Ebisugaoka. It's the first time the series is going full Japanese setting in a mainline, standalone spin-off.
Yeah, it all makes sense though. Konami has said the series over time felt like it was drifting too westernized, which is really annoying because that was also their decision
Yeah.
to pass it over.
Who gave it to the Western developers after Silent Hill 4 The Room?
Yeah, and now they're like complaining that Silent Hill is losing some of its Japanese horror essence. But anyway, with Silent Hill F, they brought in Ryukishi07, that's their pen name, basically, who made the visual novel Higurashi. And yeah, Konami basically chose Ryukishi07 to write the story. And they also brought in artist Kara for creature and character design. Yamaoka is back on music and setting it in a place inspired by real rural Japanese towns. For example, there is Kanayama in Gifu Prefecture. So, yeah, and they wanted to feel authentic Japanese.
It is all the ingredients of a great reboot about to come. I'm sure of it. I'm so excited. I hope I will not be proven wrong. Anyway, we don't yet have a perfect metric to say Silent Hill has always been more popular in America than Japan, but sales data and fan engagement for the earlier games actually strongly suggests that its biggest markets have been North America and Europe. It's part of what made the original choice of setting America so sensible for Konami back then. Now, by setting Silent Hill F in Japan though, and applying the full horror toolkit there, it's almost like the series is reclaiming part of its original identity.
Yeah, and of course, Silent Hill F launches on September 25, 2025 on PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. So basically, if you listen to this episode on the day of release, tomorrow you
Do not
will
disturb us tomorrow.
definitely not, because it's time. People will get their hands dirty in whatever horror comes from Evi Sugaoka.
So, with all that, Player One, I hope you enjoyed this episode. The foggy paths, the monsters, the cults, the creepy puzzles, the dogs that were controlling it, everything in the background,
Yes.
and the chaos in the corridors of Silent Hill history. It's been wild walking through the first 4 games, The Shadow of PT, and Silent Hills, and seeing where we are now with Silent Hill F.
As usual, new episodes of Gaming History Club are released every other Wednesday, so make sure you subscribe and follow us on our social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook as Gaming History Club.
Come back in a couple of weeks, Player One. Our next episode is going to dig into something maybe equally dark: addiction in video games. See ya!